So I wanted to know what year were you born and what's your birthday and where were you born?
Okay. My birthday, I was born on December the 3rd, 1927, in Jerome, Arizona, which is it was a thriving when I was born, mining town. And then it dried up later on. And that's a whole new story in that.
And where were your parents from?
Arizona. My mother lived in Phoenix. My dad lived in Jerome. And when he graduated, I think I've got this written down. When he graduated, his best friend's mother sent Dad, whose name is John, to keep an eye on his best buddy, which was they always got together and got into doing something. Anyway, there was a junior college in Tempe. At that time, it was a junior college. And they went down to the junior college. And Dad just played because he was waiting to be called into the Air Force at that time. Well, they had a good time. And he met my mother. And he fell in love. And he had a hard decision to make because they didn't take married men in the Air Force then. So that's why I'm here. He married mom.
Aww.
And then they moved to Jerome. And Dad, well, we lived in Cleveland, Ohio during the war, Second World War. And then we moved back to Jerome, and he loves Jerome.
And was he a miner then?
He worked in the mines when he was first married and before he was married. And there's several positions in mining, I found out. And each one has a better pay. And he worked up to being the hoistman, which I think is where you're in control of the elevator up and down. I mean, I couldn't work in a mine. I'd get claustrophobia.
Yeah.
It's dark. And another bit of news which doesn't relate to this. Glenn was being a stinker when he was a teenager. And my husband, Tom, we were living in a mining town in Lordsburg, and he took Glenn, it was in Tucson, I'm sorry. He took him out to the mine, and they went down into the cave, whatever you call it, tunnel. They were drilling way down, and they had rooms in these underground places. They had an elevator that went down, then you had rooms, and well, you've probably seen it in the movies. They load up little carts, and then they dump it into something that brings it up to the surface, the dirt.
Yeah.
The soil, or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, one day he took Glenn with him. I shouldn't tell you this, but he took Glenn and he took him out to the mine. They got on the shaft, the elevator, whatever you call it, and took him down to way down into one of these rooms. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of feet.
Whoa.
And then he turned off the lights. Well, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And he said, if you don't straighten up, this is where you're going to end. So he straightened up.
Wow. Effective.
That's a great story.
Now let's see, what's the next question?
Okay, so your dad, what kind of a dad was he like?
He was a good dad. He rarely disciplined us. Mom did that job.
Yeah, what was your mom like?
Well, I meant to tell you that when he went down to Tempe to college, and he's supposed to be checking out his best friend that doesn't, keep him in line, which is stupid because they were both together and doing things. And she paid for it. So he just played. And I understand, they had dances back then. You remember,
Yeah.
you've seen pictures. And Mom loved to dance, and Dad loved to dance, and they met each other, and that was the end of their single career. Anyway, he fell in love with her, and they moved up to Jerome. We're all innocent when we get married, most of us, back then, probably. And she was a daughter that came from Southern people. And way back in genealogy, they had a big plantation. My family did. My family way back there. And they were, at that era, they were very, I don't want to say polite because they were polite. I mean, socially, you did certain things. And I remember being at Grandma's DeShiel's house in Phoenix, and at the table we didn't sing, and you used your napkin, and they had all these rules, which I wish they practiced some of it today, because the manners are terrible.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just too
So-
critical.
So they had better etiquette back then. They were more proper.
Oh, yeah. You used your napkin, and you had silverware that you used, different.
And now everybody's a lot more casual.
Yeah, too casual. Because if you go into business and you're back east, where like Washington, D.C., and you're at a banquet, you don't lick your plate. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it pays. People judge you by your manners. Don't forget that.
I won't. I'll try not to.
And anyway, that's my mother's side. That's another story.
So did your mother grow up on the plantation then, or was that farther back?
That was 2 generations back.
Okay. So what kind of a life did your mom have growing up? Where was she growing up in Phoenix?
Well, when she was little, they lived in Pasadena. And, gosh, I don't know. Anyway, her sister, her big sister, that was her sister and her brother. She was the middle child. And her sister was born in Arkansas. And then our grandpa, I don't know where Mom was born.
So she had two siblings?
Yeah, a brother and a sister. She was the middle child.
And were her parents, like, were they well off? Or were they poor?
Back then, I don't know. Back then, I know my cousin is a genealogist. She can tell you anything. That he was in business back in Arkansas, and I don't know where about, what town, with his brother. And the business they had was a pharmacy, a drugstore with a pharmacy. And he upped and moved to Pasadena. Now that's a long way. And I suppose Mom was, I forgot where she was born. She was little.
Mm-hmm.
She said she remembers her dad working as a
Bricklayer?
And came home with his hands all blistered and
Oof.
hurt. And she remembers her mother doctoring him. Well, he didn't stay in that business very long because he knew pharmacy. So he got another job, and they had to move to Phoenix. And eventually he became the top man of the company.
Wow.
That was they had stores everywhere. And he was over from what I know, he was over all of them.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And he retired from that.
Wow.
And we really didn't know Grandpa DeShield very much. He was very proper, and so was Grandma. And he wasn't a warm, fuzzy grandpa. But when I had Cynthia, he wrote me a letter, and I kind of saw another side of him, because it was a nice, good letter. But he never played with us or anything.
Yeah.
There was, not play, but one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like my other grandpa.
So you knew your other grandpa a lot more. What was your other grandma and grandpa like?
Fun. Anyway, Dad got married and they moved to Jerome. And he worked in the mine. And he worked up to a hoistman, I think. I wish Pat were here. She knows.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Mom saying that she just loved Dad's family. He had two brothers. One was in high school, and one, I think he was in dental school. He became a dentist. And Mom said, I love your dad's family because they didn't have any strict rules. I mean, what fork to use and so on and so forth. But Mom brought that with her, that culture, mixed it with our dad's, and so it was an even Steven. I
Oh.
mean, we had good manners, but we wouldn't go way out on them,
Yeah.
too strict.
That's cool.
So they balanced each other out.
Yes. I remember Mother, you always broke your bread. You didn't butter it whole, your slice of bread. And you have to, and I was buttering it whole. She said, you break your bread first. So I tore it in two. And then at another time later, I broke my bread in two. And she says, you break your bread in two. And I thought, so I started just making little pieces. Because I'd already broken it in two. I don't know what she was thinking. So we were brought up with good manners, and we just were living in a mining town.
Did your mother work or did she stay home with you kids?
Back then, everybody stayed home with their kids.
And what was it like for moms back then? Did the moms get together?
Yeah.
And let the kids play? What was it like?
Well, they had bridge clubs back then. And I remember we lived on Sunshine Hill, which is a big hill with a lot of little houses on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived up there, and everybody knew all of their neighbors, and they got along. And anyway, there were just people working at the mine or downtown in a store, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we played with each other. You know, all the kids were about this, they were different ages, and you went with your group. But we didn't lock our house. We didn't lock our car. They delivered your groceries in a grocery truck.
Wow.
And there was a high school kid probably that stood on the back of the bumper, and the truck would stop at different houses. He'd get these groceries and run in and deliver them and jump back on the truck.
Wow. What time frame was this?
30s, early 30s, middle 30s probably, middle.
And so what was your mom's life like on a day-to-day basis? Was she at home cooking all the time? Was she keep house? Was she playing with the kids? What did she do?
She was visiting with neighbors, and she kept a good house, clean house. And I can remember her making orange juice for us. She had a new mixer back then. It had an apparatus that you stuck on it, and you could grind your, have you seen them? You grind your,
that's cool.
Like a juicer?
you cut your orange in two, and then you put it on this little
Oh, yeah.
piece, and it grinds it.
Okay.
You do that by hand. You've seen them. I have one in the cupboard. I'll show it to you if you want to get it.
Yeah.
But this thing was electric, and it went around by itself. And so she just put the half orange on there, and then the orange juice would come out of a sprout
Wow.
into a glass or a bowl. But it was so delicious.
I
Fresh
bet.
orange juice, which back then, everything was good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
believe that.
what kind of food did you eat back then? What did your mom make for you?
Oatmeal.
Yeah?
We had oatmeal a lot. And I suppose we had eggs and bacon, pancakes. But
What about milk? Do you have milk?
yes, that's when they didn't sterilize it to death. We had raw milk. It
And-
was delicious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you eat vegetables? More vegetables?
I was a very poor eater. I was skinny, believe it or not. And I just was a poor eater. So consequently, I was the last one from the table. And they got where they got to singing, my dad and mom and my two sisters. Eat your dinner, Deanie. Eat your dinner, Deanie. So it just wasn't, I just didn't have the appetite, I guess.
Did you guys eat bread? Did you ever make bread?
After I was married and on my own, but I don't remember Mom making bread. Maybe she did a couple of times. Anyway, it was a 2-bedroom house with a screen porch. It wasn't a screen porch, we called it the porch. It was a little room. It had a closet. So my baby sister, we called her my baby, my youngest sister, that was her room. And then Georgia Lee and I had the room right next to it. And they had a double bed like the one in here. And we'd all three sometimes sleep in it. And, well, I could go on and on.
So what about the Great Depression? Did that hit your family?
It didn't bother me because I was a kid. But so I never went hungry. And I look back, we took a trip to Long Beach, California. The 3 girls and Mom and Dad. And I look back and I wonder how they could afford that. But I remember standing on a stool with a new dress and Mom was hemming it. You know, pinning it up to the right length. And we went to Long Beach and us kids were so excited. We hadn't been out of Jerome hardly. Phoenix, maybe. And we were so excited. And, you know, all the new territory. And Dad said, I'll give the first one that sees the ocean, I'll give him a nickel. A nickel. That was big money then.
Yeah.
And so we were all trying to look. We were in the back seat. And at the time, the road sloped down to the ocean. There were buildings and courts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all got a nickel. I don't know who was the first one, but and I think, let's see, we rode the Ferris wheel for the first time,
Cool.
and we played in the ocean. We played on the beach, which was really foreign to us. And Dad would take us out into the ocean. You know, I was little. I probably was 7 years old or so. And it was scary to me because, you know, too much water. didn't know what was under there.
Yeah.
So I really hung on to Dad. We'd go in, wade in the, but to go out into it was scary
Mm-hmm.
for a little kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But we rented a court, or the folks rented a court, what do you call it? A room, a little cabin type thing. Court, am I using it right? There was like a motel,
Yeah.
and it had a kitchen and bedrooms, and everything you needed. And there was a bed that us kids slept in, and there was a window up about this high to us. And we'd hear these people walking by and making noises. And we got up and looked, and here's all these sailors. We'd never seen a sailor.
Wow.
So that was exciting. Anyway, and we went, and that was the first time I was on a Ferris wheel. But there were shops, souvenir shops. And I think we were there just a short time. A week, probably were including traveling. But that was my first time to see the ocean and go in it.
That sounds amazing.
It does.
Such a fun trip.
Yes. And did I tell you that I was standing on a stool and I had a new dress? This was
Oh.
before we were trip.
Yeah.
My mother was hemming it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And this was when I was about the first or in kindergarten. Dad would try to wrestle with us. And he said, we'd get on the rug, he'd throw us down and he put his legs over us, and here we were, caught it. He says, this is the scissor hold. I remember, and we did, Mom! We didn't like it. I didn't like it. He needed a son. Anyway. And then we moved to another house. And it was more fancier. These were just little houses for the miners. And the walls, they probably have it today. The walls were made of fiber, pressed fiber,
Mm-hmm.
which they do today. But they were softer, And one time, but this has nothing to do with it. One time, our grandma, Nana, we called her Nana, and that's Spanish, I think, for grandma. And each Easter, she would give us baby chickens, colored. Sometimes they were colored. They dyed these little chickens. I don't know whether they put a syringe needle in the shell or how they dyed those little baby chickens. And she'd bring us these chickens, and sometimes it was some ducks.
Oh, wow.
Well, they didn't last long. The dogs caught them.
Oh.
And of course, that broke our hearts.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any place to put them.
Mm.
So Mom took the screens off the window, 4 of them, and in the bedroom put some papers down and put these screens and put the darn chickens in there. This was in Pat's bedroom.
Oh my goodness.
And they were little, but they were beginning to grow. And one of the screens fell over and hit the chicken,
Oh.
and it was flopping around.
Oh.
And that was so traumatic.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
So sad.
Oh my.
And we had a dog. We had a couple of dogs, but this dog we kept. And his name was Beans. And he grew up with us. And going up to the house was on a sloping hill, so the front door had a lot of stairs to go clear up to the top. And in the back door, back of the house, it was just a couple of steps. And there was a level part, and then you walk down some in the yard, and you walk down, there was more level, and there was cottonwood trees that they were nursing along. And of course it was all fenced in. And the neighbors were right next to us, and the little girls next door, they'd come to the fence and look over at us. We'd do the same thing, I'm sure. Anyway, time went on and we moved, and I think I was 11. 10 or 11. And we had good Christmases there, and it was and I have a picture of Mom had a big Halloween party, and I think half of the kids in Jerome came.
Wow.
That's cool.
And of course we were all dressed up, and it was a bigger house. Like I said, the living room and the dining room were connected. Now, so we didn't have a dining room in the other house. We ate in the kitchen. The kitchen was big enough where it had a table. And it was a nice house. We were excited because it had a downstairs. You had to go out to go downstairs, and that's where the washroom was. Mom's washing machine. And there was a extra room, and our toys were in there. So we'd go down there and play in this room. And then some neighbors lived next door. And Mom wouldn't let us go down there when the kids were, the neighbor kids were home. She didn't want them influencing us.
Mm.
And they had an older brother, Roland. And he was too old for us. But he was, and I had started to develop my breasts.
Mm.
And he made a remark about it. I had a tight dress on, evidently. We didn't have jeans, and we always wore dresses.
Yeah.
So, and they had a girl named Barbara, I think, and then Sydney. Sydney wasn't quite all there.
Mm.
But we wanted to play with them because we didn't have it. Our house was at the end of the housing area. It was on a hill, a street, Jerome was built on a hill. I should show you pictures.
Yeah.
Work. Where are my pictures? I don't know.
When you find them, you can always text us a picture too.
Yes, I can.
We'd love to see that.
Anyway, and had this house was pink, painted pink house. Can imagine.
Wow.
The company evidently had a lot of pink paint. See, it was a company house. The company owned all the houses.
The mining company?
Huh?
The mining company?
And I'd like to know why we moved. Did Dad get a promotion or something? I don't know. It had 2 bedrooms and a closet connecting the bedrooms. And we had a cat, Itty K is what we call her. And she was a female. Well, she had, Mom put a box down because she was going to have kittens.
Kittens.
And, you know, she wouldn't let us in and see. They kept those things private.
Mm.
But we had some little kittens. Itty K.
Oh, I bet that was adorable.
Yeah. And we had another pet, Canary. And we called him Billy. And then one day he started singing. I guess the males don't sing, I don't know. But one day, we had him quite a while. And then one day, Mom went out there and he was on the bottom of the cage with his feet up.
Oh no.
So that was the end of Billy.
Oh no.
But I was going to tell you, when we lived on Sunshine Hill, Dad brought this little dog home, and that was Beans. And my sister said, and I let him roll down the stairs. There was all these stairs going up to the front porch. And I guess he was tumbling down. And he was just a little pup. We loved him, and he loved us. And he was this is a different story. It's about Beans. Well, he grew up, he was part bulldog.
Wow.
And I don't know what the other part was, but he was a strong personality in the dog kingdom.
Yeah.
He was the leader. Because some of the dogs would run free in this neighborhood, which Beans would. And he became friends with Tippy, who was kind of a knothead, but he was Beans' sidekick. It was just like humans. And
Wow.
Beans was the leader, a stronger personality, and whatever Beans did, Tippy approved of it and went right along with it, wagging his tail. And back then they probably still do, cut the tails off of dogs. I don't know why.
I don't know why they do that.
Anyway, Beans had a short little tail. And Tippy didn't have, he had his tail. Well, there was a neighbor dog that Beans hated. And when he was running around loose in the neighborhood, like Beans, they would get into fights. I mean, Beans ruled the neighborhood. And one time, they got into a fight and they were in our yard. And I mean, they were really going after it. You know, about to kill each other. And Mom went out and caught the hose and sprayed them, trying to get them to quit fighting. But when they fought, Tippy, he would run around in circles, like he was saying, "Come on, give me." And they just, you know, Tippy would just. It just was like a cartoon.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
That's crazy.
Well, when we had to move from Jerome, we had to. He ruled the neighborhood, like I said. Well, when we moved to the pink house, of course he moved with us, and he ran the neighborhood. He'd go downtown and he was. We had a policeman, a cop, that patrolled everything. One cop.
Wow.
And he'd follow the cop around. They were good friends. And the cop, we had a little jail house. And that's another story about the jail. But it was, how big was it? I bet it wasn't any bigger than from the counter to here.
Wow.
And it was narrow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day, I can't think of the cop's name. Anyway, he went down to open it up. You know, they had people staying in it. He went down and opened it, and out walks Beans.
Oh.
He had followed him in there, and then Tom, that was his name, Tom Cantrell, and he didn't know it, and he locked him in there for the night. So when he opened it up the next morning, here comes Beans.
Oh my goodness.
That's funny.
And that jail became famous because it walked across the road. It means that the town was shifting and falling, you know, the ground was changing. And I remember Panka's store, he had to move to another store because there were big cracks in the building and
Oh wow.
so on. So because underneath this town, part of it was shifting down. So this little garage, jail, it gradually shifted down across the road to the other side of the road.
Whoa.
If you ever go to Jerome, Arizona,
Okay.
check everything out like that.
We
I think
will.
the jail is still, you can still see it down the bank.
That's cool.
Wow.
We gotta go.
Yeah.
We'd love to.
How did you guys stay cooled off in the summer?
Well, it was really hot,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember when we lived on Sunshine Hill, my dad figured out how to cool the house. So he brought home this motor with a big fan. He made a box and he put, what do you call that stuff when it's all shredded little pieces of wood and they,
Oh, like sawdust?
not sawdust, it was coarser. You know, it was like little wires put all together. Oh gosh, I can't think. Excelsior. I can't think of the name of it. But they used it for insulation,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he lined this box, put a hole in it, in the side, round circle, and put a fan on the back of it inside this box. And part of it was, then he fixed it where there was a little dripping water down on this Excelsior or whatever you call it. And it turned, he lined the box with it, that's right. And then the water, he made a little pipe with holes in it, and the water dripped down on this Excelsior or whatever you call it, and kept it wet. And then that fan that he had situation, and it was like a hole in the, if you put a hole in the wall, then the fan would be right behind there and blow out this cold air, cool air.
Wow.
Wow.
And I remember him fixing it, you know, and turning it on, and about blew us all away. I, us kids, you know, wow! You know, it was strong.
Wow, that's awesome.
But it cooled the house, this little house.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
And of course, we didn't have refrigeration.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, we had an ice box,
Okay.
you know, where you put your, if you want the iceman to stop and give you ice, well, this poster, which was, you know, about this size, it was divided, and it would tell you, at the top it would say 50 pounds, then 40 pounds, or 25 pounds, and 10 pounds. And so the iceman, you put it up so the iceman could see it. And when he was driving by, he could see in the window that you wanted ice, and he knew how much because of this number that was at the top of this cardboard. So he would bring the ice, and you left your door open, of course, and put it in your ice box. Now your ice box didn't have a motor. You know, you've seen them, ice
Yeah.
boxes. They just have ice to keep your food cold. That's what we had. To keep our milk cool and eggs and whatever. And that's what they had. Everybody had one. You know, there was a song about the Iceman. Anyway, so Dad built a cooler for the other, and he lined it with burlap and a little pipe, you know, metal pipe, or using little copper pipes, put holes in it, and so it would drip down on this burlap and keep it cool. And it didn't have a motor, but it was sitting in a window outside. So, and it would keep things halfway. You know, it wasn't It
as
wasn't
good as
like
a
the
refrigerator.
Yeah. We kids
Wow.
were so. Anyway.
Wow.
Did you go swimming?
Oh yeah. We had a pool, a public pool, that only the whites could be there. The Mexicans lived downtown. They had their own swimming pool, but they tore the dressing rooms up for firewood, and so it kind of closed down. So they didn't take care of it. Anyway, we were swimming when we were just little, before we went to school. And I remember we put our swimsuits on, and Dad would put his on, and we had our towels, and he'd take us down to the swimming pool, which was right below our community of houses, and it was free.
Oh, wow.
It was the company pool.
Oh, that's cool.
And then they had across the street, they had a tennis court you could use.
Wow.
So they took good care of their employees.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a hospital.
Oh,
A
wow.
big 3-story hospital. And that's where I was born. Anyway, excuse me. We were little, and the Red Cross came in and gave lessons. Well, you know, they had a wading pool for little kids. And we got in the big cool pool, and it was, of course, shallow on one end. And they'd teach us swimming lessons. I think I learned to swim before they came in. But I took, we took the course anyway. And every year they would come in and give swimming lessons to the public. And all our friends, and we'd go in there. I got many a sunburn. We lived and I learned to dive in the deep end from the sidewalk, pick up a rock and come back. We do that. And then I learned to get on the high diving board. Anyway, we grew up with swimming. I mean, that's my favorite sport. That's all it is. I'm not a sport person, but I do like it.
Yeah, I think you gotta like swimming when you live in Arizona.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna tell you, we'd put on our swimsuits, and Dad would take us down there, and we would, before it was open, and a high school kid would be hosing off the sidewalks and cleaning up the place. And it had change rooms, and you had to disinfect your feet. They had a box where you had to step in, and it was a solution to.
Let bounce.